Und jetzt kommen wir natürlich zum absoluten Höhepunkt. Wir haben einen ganz besonderen Gast heute das ist seine königliche Hoheit, Prinz Carlos de Bourbon de Parme, Mitglied des niederländischen Könighauses, Herzog von Parma und Piacenza und das amtierende Oberhaupt von Bourbon de Parme. Und er studierte Politikwissenschaft an der Wesleyan University in Connecticut und Demographie und Philosophie an der Cambridge Universität in England und engagiert sich seit 20 Jahren immer für das Thema Nachhaltigkeit. Warum? Das wird er auch gleich ein bisschen erklären, weil es eine neutrale Person braucht, die alle Stakeholder an einen Tisch bringt. Und er ist eben seit 20 Jahren engagiert in diesen Projekten und seit 10 Jahren hat er eine eigene Stiftung. Und was er heute machen wird, ist, sich genau damit zu beschäftigen, wie das Cradle-to-Cradle Change Management in Unternehmen in Niederlanden läuft und wie man eigentlich vorausgucken kann, wie man eigentlich die verschiedenen Ebenen zusammenbringen kann. Er wird vielleicht auch ein bisschen erzählen, er ist nämlich in den Niederlanden so etwas wie der Architekt der Energiewende in Deutschland ist er das in den Niederlanden. Und wir sind sehr gespannt, ein wenig zu hören, wie er die Zukunft sieht und wie er Cradle to Cradle in der Perspektive sieht und ja, was sich da jetzt schon so getan hat. Ich gebe Ihnen das Wort und freue mich ganz herzlich, dass Sie da sind.
Danke. And this is the moment we switch over to English. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. Thank you very much for the introduction. Dr. Griefhan, I appreciate it tremendously. All this royal bullshit you can forget from now on. I'm here on a professional basis, and the only thing that my family has brought me was to think dynastically, to think long-term. Because one of the things that we as family have is we want to rule, and we want to rule for a long time, so we have to make sure that our children are prepared and our grandchildren are planned for. And that is why society for us is so important. But that's a bit of a joke of our side. Anyway, Your Excellencies, Burgermeister, friends, I don't know why you're sitting in the corner. Why don't you sit in the middle? Yeah, you sure? Okay, Michael. Distinguished guests, it is an honor to address such an influential audience on this topic that I have been committed to for the last 20 years, a sustainable future for all. Over the last 20 years, I have had the privilege to witness how the slowly increasing awareness on environmental issues evolved into an international recognition of the necessity to fundamentally change our production and consumption patterns, our policies, and our business models. An event such as this Cradle to Cradle Congress are the very proof that times are indeed changing. And I want to specifically thank Professor Braungart for being the driving force behind Cradle to Cradle. We urgently need, we really need people like you. People who create systemic solutions for the problems we face. Thank you for your courage and your perseverance, and thank you for the others who are taking over his baton and continuing it forward. Seriously. Good point. Let's be honest, 10 years ago, or probably even less, most of you here today did not foresee an event like this happening. Especially with so many of the next generation present. And yet here we are. Like it or not, you are now part of something bigger than your own organization. And even better, every speaker you will hear at this Congress and every single person attending is a leader of change. Steve Jobs once said that innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. So yes, I am talking about every person here today because it is the longing for innovation that brought you to Lunenburg. The ambition to change our methods and our businesses for the better. Over the years, it has been inspiring and encouraging to see how many movements, philosophies, organizations, models, agreements, and individuals all help to piece together our home, because that exactly is what our planet is, our home. Cradle to cradle, circular economy, the Paris Agreement, the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, the Global Reporting Initiative, Earth Hour, the World Business Council for Sustainable Leadership, and the list goes on and on and on. They're all pieces of the same puzzle. And you also represent pieces of what we need to put back together, to repair, to rebalance what is flawed, what we have broken. Fixing this puzzle is our common ground. Each piece helps to achieve the sustainable future that we want for ourselves and for our future generations. I've looked at the list of speakers this organization has put together for you, and I was duly impressed. You have quite an interesting journey ahead of you. Since they all work in their own way towards a sustainable economy and society, I would like to reflect a little on this word, because especially for the next 2 days, it is important that you're all on the same page when it comes to the definition of sustainability. I am sure that if I would go around the room and ask you what is sustainability, I would get a broad variety of answers. But 29 years ago, the UN published the famous Brundtland Report. This report represented a new concept, sustainable development. The concept became one of the few accepted, agreed upon approaches to be introduced in many years on the issue of sustainability. In fact, it helped shape the international agenda and the international community's attitude towards economic, social, and environmental development, even if it is much criticized. The Brundtland Commission's report defines sustainable development as follows. Sustainable development is development which meets the needs of our generation without compromising the ability of the next generation to meet their own needs. That's it. Very short. Basically, it's about fairness. An unsustainable world is unfair to us, to those who have less, to the poor, to the bottom of the pyramid, and especially to future generations. The concept supports strong economic and social development, especially development, not necessarily growth. In particular, for people with a low standard of living. At the same time, it underlines the importance of protecting the natural resource base and the environment. Economic and social well-being cannot be improved with measures that destroy the environment, our planetary boundaries, as you well know. It is interesting to see that throughout the years, sustainability was automatically related to the environment, climate change, resource efficiency, technical innovation. And although understandable, these associations can create a mist that blurs the view on what the essence of sustainability really is. It is about fairness. And more than anything else, sustainability is a mindset. As far as I'm concerned, so is Cradle to Cradle. People sometimes ask me, how do we get this mindset? Because they think it is complicated. Well, it is not. Let me illustrate the essence of this particular mindset and how there is no trick to it other than the use of common sense. Yes, the same common sense that has made you wonder what these bloody elephants are doing here behind me. Let me solve the mystery. My grandfather was one of the founders of the World Wildlife Fund, and he took me to Africa once, to South Africa, to the Karoo, and to the Kruger National Park, where we went to count elephants. 1 elephant, 2 elephants, 3 elephants. And these elephants were amazing. A troop of elephants would walk through the jungle and rip up trees and eat up the green. And my grandfather said, this is great, because the trees, this woods, these jungles need air, need new light to come down and to regrow. So the elephants eat and they give life back to the woods. 2 years later, he invited me again, this time to the Namib Desert. There are trees in the Namib Desert, but they are few and far between. And the same troop of elephants goes and walks to a tree and doesn't rip it up out of the ground. No. The elephants take 1 or 2 branches of the tree, and then they walk to the next tree. And again, 1, 2, 3 branches off that tree. And in a year's time, the elephants make a circle of about 500-600 kilometers, and they come back to the first tree. And guess what? The tree has regrown the branch, and the elephant can eat again. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the message is simple. If elephants can understand this mindset, it's a mindset that should steer our choices, our decisions, our policies, as organizations, as companies, governments, and as individuals. A mindset that makes us realize that a sustainable future can only be realized if we work together and create new and unusual alliances and partnerships. On a global scale, we already witness what a changing mindset can lead to, because I thoroughly believe that COP21 in Paris, for the first time in history, the general mindset was something needs to be done. It led to an agreement that was far from perfect, and that was and is rightfully criticized. But we should also acknowledge that it sent a message to the world that mindsets are changing. Most of you already have that mindset, otherwise you wouldn't be here. As leaders for change, you can steer others in the same direction. It is the kind of leadership we need in these exciting, interesting, as well as challenging times. Because they are challenging. We can read and see the news every single day. John F. Kennedy once pointed out that the Chinese use 2 brushstrokes to write the word crisis. One brushstroke stands for danger, the other for opportunity. In a crisis, you should be aware of the danger, but also recognize the opportunity. I believe that these 2 strokes brought all of us together today. We are very aware of the challenges and dangers, and at the same time, we recognize the opportunities. Living in a country that is constantly under threat of water, the Netherlands, lies several meters under sea level, the Dutch are good examples of how to use a challenge to create opportunity. Over the last few decades, we have developed a unique knowledge on water management, and it has become one of our prime export services and products. The Netherlands is also a country of limited resources, which is one of the reasons the circular economy has taken off at a surprisingly fast speed. I have personally witnessed how in the last 5 years it developed from a business model for a few brave small and medium-sized enterprises to actual long-term policy for the national government. However, I am also very much aware that circular economy concept is but the first tentative steps towards cradle to cradle. During the Dutch EU presidency last year, I was chairman of the national campaign, The Netherlands as a Circular Hotspot, which boosted the most promising circular initiatives and developments in our country. One of the most iconic circular projects is Park 2020, developed by a good friend of mine, Mr. Koert Zachariasse, a real estate project developer who designs and builds offices according to the cradle-to-cradle principle. From the beginning, he asked Bill McDonough to help him, and together they realized a fundamentally new, sustainable approach to office development. It is located close to Amsterdam Airport, and it combined sustainable values, job satisfaction, health, and economic growth. And it is a tremendous success. But following up on their success, Bill and Kurt have started an even more ambitious project, which to me is even more inspiring, the Circular Valley, or short, the Valley, which will become the first circular hub in the world, a place where circular challenges from around the world will be solved together with a unique mix of stakeholders. To me, this project embodies the core of what will bring all the pieces of the puzzle together. The UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said after the signing of the COP21 agreement in Paris, "It is not only government. Government cannot do it alone. The UN cannot do it alone. There should be full partnership of society. Even a normal individual has a place to play. They all have a role to play." And the more I get involved in a wide range of sustainable initiatives and developments and businesses, I realize that I cannot stress enough that we all have a role to play. I also want to point out that time is of the essence. The Romans said, "Tempus fugit." They really had no idea that only thousands of years later the expression would be really accurate. How time flies. I imagine all of us in this room have said that once in a while. But do we really grasp how fast this time is really changing? It took television 70 years to reach 2 billion people. Facebook did it in 7 years. Apple introduced the iPhone in 2007. Now 2.5 billion people are using smartphones. Tesla launched its first electric car in 2008. And only 15 years from now, a third of all the cars in the world will be electric. 2 billion people use and buy products online today. This was St. Peter's Square in Rome at the announcement of Pope Benedict XVI. Note the early adapter in the corner, right there. This is 5 years later. So in case you hadn't realized it yet, as an organization, municipality, town, city, business, you cannot sit still and rely on business as usual, because there is no as usual anymore. Those days are gone. Keeping up with change and innovation is now the minimum requirement to survive, let alone grow. We all know what happens to companies that did not see change coming in time. Kodak, poof. Nokia, bye-bye. BlackBerry, no more. Xerox, Bang & Olufsen, Neckermann, to name just a few. With the costs of natural resources on the rise, the cradle-to-cradle approach is without a doubt one of the most future-proof innovations I have seen in the last 10 years. Again, a huge compliment to Professor Braungart for developing and creating this concept and not giving up after years and years and years and years and years. Now, to conclude, I have no doubts that the speakers in the next days will inspire you and will give you lots of food for thought. In addition, there are 3 things I hope you will take home with you at the end of the Congress. The first one is a very basic one, but one which, for some reason or other, we keep on forgetting. Descartes said, "The earth belongs to us." Wrong. We belong to the earth. And if you keep that in mind, all your choices from that perspective will be much better. Second, there you can also see how powerful a concept can be. His idea that the earth belongs to us as human beings was the start and made possible the Industrial Revolution. Just one thought. Turn it around, and maybe that thought can have just as much power to solve the unbalance that we've created with the linear economy. The second thing is the value of partnerships and coalitions. Keep a very open mind in the next couple of days when it comes to who you can work with to reach your new goals. The third thing I hope that you will take with you is the importance of sharing knowledge and innovation. For a long time, we've closed ourselves. It's time to open. We can only complete the puzzle when we share what we know and innovate together. I'm sure that many of you are very passionate about the solutions you have to offer. So please share that passion, but never forget to listen what the others have to offer. Their piece of the puzzle might fit or even complete yours perfectly. And last, but certainly not least, be patient. This journey of new standards such as cradle to cradle and system change has just begun. I am privileged to meet and work every day with people that believe in this new era. Their willingness and readiness to work together is always inspiring, and I am convinced that in this day and age, this is probably the most important mindset. We cannot, if we want to build a better future for everyone, we have to face the challenges together. Countries, companies, organizations, NGOs, yes, people like me and you. But it won't happen overnight. We need to be patient while fighting for it. But eventually, the puzzle will be completed. One of my favorite all-time quotes is this one. The conservation of our natural resources and their proper use are fundamental for almost every other problem of our national life. These words were spoken in 1907 by President Teddy Roosevelt. So you see, sometimes it takes a little while before we understand what is really important. But eventually we will get there, step by step. One might even say they're baby steps. But that's how we learned how to walk. And I'm counting on you, leaders of change, here in the room tonight and tomorrow, to get us there on time. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Yeah, we're here tonight to start talking, to start with our conversation for the weekend. And so I would like to start with that as well. You were talking about sustaining the way we have our world, about sustainability. You were talking about sustaining this world. And what we were talking about is when we think about future generations, I think the most of the people really working with cradle to cradle think that actually only sustaining is not enough. And probably that's not what you mean, because you're also working on transition, you're working on how to change the world. But how can we then work with the word of sustainability when we actually want to change the world for the better?
That's a very good question. The definition of sustainability in the Brundtland Report is not great, but it is the only one that the whole world agrees upon, and we need to have one starting point. If we do not have a starting point, it's very difficult to find an end point. So although I do not like the definition, it is the only one that the whole community agrees on as a starting point. And I agree. Not doing bad is not doing good, and it's definitely not good enough. If I'm a dictator and I only kill 500 people and I say, no, I'm going to do better, I'm only going to kill 50 today, not good. Agreed. But to bring society to understand that is much more difficult. So again, that's why I said circular economy is an easy first step for businesses, governments to start understanding. From there on, it becomes much easier to go towards cradle to cradle. Cradle to cradle is extremely ambitious and is the best in class at the moment, and that is the aim we should go for, and as quickly as possible. But not everybody can go from 0 to 100 in one go. And that is why it's so important that we have these congresses, because we need to keep that standard as high as possible and wave that flag as long as possible, to invite the people to go step up the ladder towards cradle to cradle.
And
enough of the clapping already. Wait 1 second.
So, but then what should we do that circular economy is not becoming the next buzzword and we will have everything circular and it will be trash in circles?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, because you can recycle asbestos, but it's still asbestos, and that makes absolutely no sense. So you have to keep on hammering that circular economy is the first step, but that the ambition level is much higher. And the policymakers, Burgermeister, State Secretary, those are the people who have to say, okay, listen, it's good that the circular economy starts, because the word economy makes people happy. And you can say, but watch out that the solutions that you make now do not create the problems for the future. I was talking to a friend of mine who works at the Vatican, and he said, you guys are going towards a changing of systems, but did you ever ask the people who have no voice what that would mean for them? Are you not creating the problems for the next generation? You're solving them but then you're pushing it forward. So we have to constantly keep on thinking what we change now. Yes, we need to go to cradle and circular economy and all these best things, but keep in mind to make sure that you also bring organizations on board that have the voice for those who do not have a voice in this change. For example, the church. They represent 1 billion people who have no voice, but they keep it in mind. And NGOs like Greenpeace, they have the voice of the animals and World Wildlife Fund, because the animals have no voice. They can go and vote for the next elections. So keep those organizations in the loop and together with them. That's why I say these unusual alliances are so important.
Yeah, that's what we're trying here for the next days, also to bring these people together.
Excellent.
Actually, in the Netherlands, a lot of that what we are talking about is already working. I mean, not all, but when we are here in Germany, we look at the Netherlands and then we see, okay, there's a city hall in Venlo. There are people creating cradle to cradle municipalities, yes, cities, and they are really going much more than we are doing.
Because they've seen the word economics in it. And therefore, they say, hey, this is our jobs creation, we can make more value, we can do better. And suddenly, the word economics is circular economy, it becomes an easier concept. When I started the Energiewende, everybody goes, oh, it's going to be more expensive, and it's going to be difficult, and I'm going to have to put batteries in my bicycle, and all the, it's too costly and expensive and difficult. And it was a real uphill struggle. When we started with circular economy, oh, that's fun. Hey, economics, more money, that makes sense. And so use that as a way to stimulate them and then push them towards cradle to cradle as soon as possible.
But what should we do here then to learn from you?
Well, first of all, again, see this as an opportunity in a crisis, because the Netherlands is convinced that, and come and steal our ideas, you're welcome to them, as quickly as possible, because you have much more stronger economic engine than we do. So as soon as you start implementing this in Germany, you will see them all over the world. Holland is a small country, but the basis is We see that as our economic engine for the next 100 years.
It's really nice talking to you. Maybe you guys want to join us and also have some questions and talk with us. So I would come around if there's any questions of anyone else.
Any questions?
Does anyone else want to ask something? Just raise up your hand. Don't be too shy.
There's one over there.
Oh, there's one over here.
Hi, my name is George Hobach. Thank you for your speech, it was very moving. And I wanted to ask you, why are you so sure that cradle to cradle is really the standard we need to go for? I agree with your premise, but I would like to know what convinced you to say that.
Waste is ridiculous. And up to now, I haven't found a system that reaches that seriously. I mean, a lot of ideas and beautiful dreams, which, again, not bad, but that we need to dream, and that is in such a way. I've never seen a practical system that works, that reaches to a level of zero waste. It is, up till now, the only one I've come across that makes sense, that is easy, that is affordable, and takes the stakeholder with you on a journey of understanding to why and how to do it. No other system so far I have seen reaches that level of success. Anybody else?
Is there anyone else? There are some volunteers around. Oh, I can come to you as well.
Yes, one of the parts of Cradle to Cradle is to try not to use so many resources that are not available anymore in the amount they were before.
Yep.
So the idea of putting taxes on resources and retire them from work would be a fantastic idea that would also help Cradle to Cradle. So I would like to hear from you your ideas and how do you intend to push up this movement and try to implement it in the Netherlands.
Obrigado. Thank you. Like Cradle to Cradle, another systemic change that is necessary is to re-look at our whole tax model. Today, we tax primarily labor. And we have 7 billion people on this planet, so there's no shortage of labor. And every time a company gets into difficulties, the first thing they do is they get rid of the most expensive part of their business, labor. On the other hand, we are in a resource and energy-constrained society, but we're not taxing resources and we're not taxing energy. So that needs to change, because if you start taxing energy and resources, suddenly businesses have other things to change. Instead of firing people, they can look at how their whole resource chain is set up, how it works. So we launched an initiative in the Netherlands called X-Tax, and we did something rather peculiar. We got KPMG, their biggest competitor, Ernst & Young, with their biggest competitor, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and with their biggest competitor, I forgot the fourth one, again, one of the big four accountancy and fiscal firms, to come together and look what would happen to our society if we shift taxes from labor to resources and materials. And CO2, for example, tax on carbon carbon is a resource just as much as anything else. So a tax on it. And it is amazing what happened. 4 competitors were in agreement, first of all. Second of all, there was the whole economic model becomes much bigger. Instead of economic growth in the old linear model, you see an economic growth in the circular model, and you see that you have more and faster economic growth than you have now. It's difficult to change the mindsets of the fiscal departments of governments because they rely on tax on labor, but it is one of the system change ideas out there, just like Cradle to Cradle, that needs to be held. And I think a lot of these things can work together. As I said, it's all parts of the puzzle. Cradle to Cradle is one part of the puzzle, X-Tax is part of the puzzle, water issues, food issues, security, bringing girls, especially girls, to school is part of the puzzle, because if you want to solve the world population growth problem, there's only two solutions. One is to bring girls to school. If you bring girls to school in the third world countries or in developing countries, you see that hygiene goes up, baby deaths goes down drastically. The size of the family goes from 6 kids immediately to 2 or 1 child per family. You see that safety, education for all the family goes up. Pension building goes up, financial understanding goes up. And that is one of the best breaks for the human population explosion that we're living today. And the second one is an obvious one, is to help through the SDGs to make sure that the countries in poverty are raised up a level. You see, after a certain amount of time, $1,000 per month income, you see population decline immediately. I didn't think of these ideas. They're out there.
Are there any other questions? Noch andere Fragen? Ja, hier in der Mitte. Johannes, magst du einmal?
Hello, thank you for being here. Greatly appreciate the conversation. Question, how do you see the value of rules and regulations, laws? What do you think of the importance?
A best society is a society that goes towards goals and not rules. Rules, however, are necessary, but the rules become stale ethics. It's the ethics of yesterday put into a rule becomes fixed. And so you have to constantly have the courage to challenge those rules, not break them, but challenge the validity of the rules. Rules are only valuable for a short period of time, relatively. The older the rule is, if it's not of value, then and our society has the bad habit of every time there's an exception is to make a rule against that exception, while the whole system is not affected by it. And so we should have the courage to look, and it's not easy. I can ask you, what is culture? And I would get, I don't know how many people are here, 500, I would get 500 different definitions of culture. But culture is basically what we have as a society found to be the rules and the solutions for problems stacked on top of each other. Why is Germany different from Holland? Very easy. You guys are not going to be flooded by the sea. So we've had to solve problems differently than you've had to solve problems differently. The result is 2 different cultures. Now the difficult thing to do, and I'm sure the Bürgermeister agrees with me, is to take out old solutions from that stack, because they feel like they're our identity. I'm German or I'm Dutch, and suddenly you take some clogs, you know, the wooden shoes. The Dutch created them, very useful because we are living in mud, and it's cheap and warm. Perfect. Then came rubber shoes, boots, much better. Cheap, warm, and wasserfest. So clogs are no longer useful. Still, they form part of our culture. But imagine if we all still wanted clogs and we're still cutting down trees and deforesting, I think, to make clogs, we should have the courage to say, okay, that should be taken out of our culture, we throw away the clogs, sabotage, and then we get rid of that problem. But it is a difficult thing to do, but that means that society has to help the leaders who want change and stand behind them, because no leader will stand alone. So if there's leaders that stand up to do change, stand behind them, support them. Because it is easy to criticize, very easy to criticize. But it's difficult to say, okay, I support you. Simple answer to a difficult question.
There was one more question over there, right here in the middle as well.
Yeah, hi. Just one question. As you Dutch people have been done a great job in putting out the economy, the economics in circular economy. Do you have some suggestions or ideas on our Energiewende? Because to put out the great financial potential, because, well, as you said, the image it lacks a bit of sexiness, I would say.
Yeah, that's a very good and difficult question. I would say make it yours. Own the problem. If you make it yours, part of your identity solution, we want as a people to have no impact or even a positive impact in the world. And make it a problem of your own and make it something that you integrate into your culture. That makes it, and I don't know your German culture enough to say what makes it sexy or not. I don't know, put a big bratwurst on it, very stereotypical, but I started with clogs and tulips, so I can do bratwurst here as well. But make it something that form it in a way that makes it German, and I think that would be a step forward. But it is very difficult. On the other hand, maybe you can find some wild advertising and marketing gurus out there in a zoo or in some corporation and try to convince them, instead of using their extremely good talents to sell you crap products, to use their talents to motivate people to go towards the right direction. So find me a wild marketeer.
So last questions. I think we can maybe...
A young lady over there.
Yeah, over one, then there's two, and there's three. There, yeah.
Thank you. There's some kind of criticism out there. People say that cradle to cradle is a utopian concept played by highly developed countries and relatively smaller countries in this world, and notably in this part of the world, yeah? Do you think it is a concept that can be used in developing countries, especially bigger developing countries like China and India and Mexico? Because my colleague and I here, we represent part of the United Nations, and we are actually implementing development projects in developing countries. Do you think the C2C, the cradle-to-cradle concept can be used as a guiding principles in these development projects?
Thank you. Very good question. Absolutely. Now, it's actually you should aim that question at Professor Baumgart here. But I will try to. You can speak to him later about this. But I'll try to give you my impression of the answer to that question. If cradle-to-cradle is implemented fully, it means that a company or a society or a product knows exactly where the stuff comes from and what the effects are. Do you have an iPhone? How many people have a smartphone in this room? Just raise your hands. Okay, thank you. Do you know where the hundreds of materials that are present in your smartphone came from? How many can lift their hands now? 10, 20 people? We all know that to mine coltan, small children in Africa die every day, yet we still use the iPhone. But if we know that because we have passed the whole cradle-to-cradle and the whole supply chain, that becomes apparent. And suddenly a negative effect of a beautiful product, because the iPhone is a very good product. Everybody wants one. And I use it all the day, every day. I can make pictures of it. Wow, it's for my kids dancing. It's fantastic. But if we really implement cradle-to-cradle, then knowing where it comes from makes it impossible for companies to continue using that type of resource in that way. So cradle-to-cradle, yes, in the elitist West is good, which makes sense, but it has an effect on the bottom of the pyramid, which is very direct, on the one hand. Secondly, countries that, China, for example, is one of the biggest polluters in the world, we all know this, but they are the quickest ones to change, and Brazil, they're the quickest ones to change because they know exactly why they're doing it. China said 20 years ago, we're going to use everything we can to jump ahead economically to the same standards as the United States, and once we get there, very quickly, we're going to turn it all around, and this is what they're doing. They're closing power plants every day and building the same capacity in wind, solar, geothermal, and alas, also hydro in the Yangtze River, which is an ecological disaster, but the idea is good behind it. So and they have the capacity to change, and they do change very, very fast. So yes, cradle to cradle is not just for the elite. Last question? Last question?
There were two more, one over there and one over there.
Hello, sir.
Sorry to make you all feel guilty about your smartphones.
No, it's okay. We don't feel judged. You said we're leaders of change.
Yes.
Simon Sinek said each leader needs their followers, and followers are following because their belief system is resonating with the belief system of the leader. So the point is, how do you transport your belief system? For me, at least, what would you say makes a great leader for change?
Oof, you're answering that young man's question, and the capacity to organize your following is one. So you have to develop the skills to create a following, and that can be done by first standing and helping behind those leaders that you think are doing good today. Capacity. Secondly, is to really define your ideas on a meta level. Yes, in the practical side, but also a philosophy on the meta level. An idea can change much more than 10 practical tools. And thirdly, and definitely not last, it is a bloody hard work, long-term effort, and it means once you take that commitment, is to not stop, is to continue, until either you run against a wall which you cannot move, which I hope you don't, or by sheer determination, you manage to launch something like Cradle to Cradle.
We see that we could talk way much longer on these terms, but there's the last question of this lady in the middle there.
Well, yeah, thanks again. And what an honor for the last question here. But I also thought, as you said, that sustainability is a mindset or could be seen as one. But a mindset to me is like the way we think and then we act that manner. And that's something we do intrinsically. Can something like that or a mindset be achieved extrinsically by others? How can others influence one person? I'm always wondering how we can make people believe in these things, and is that a bottom-up process, is that a top-down process? Can that be achieved extrinsically? I don't know, how is that circular?
I like these questions, they're good. Top-down, bottom-up depends a lot on the culture. Whether in Holland top-down wouldn't work, people would just not accept it at all. In a given done like they did in Germany, saying or like Roosevelt changed the American economy in one day from civil production to military production in one day, would absolutely not work in the Netherlands. So culturally dependent is one thing. And secondly, I completely agree with Professor Hendrik here, Professor Dr. Hendrik, is to be radical. The word radical comes from the word radice in Latin, meaning roots. It doesn't mean being radical what we today say as radical, as crazy. No, it means going back to the roots and understanding why the society is as it is, and from that point back, build up your arguments why that should change. That would be the second thing. So it is looking at the real problem. Let me give you maybe a bit of an example away from this, but we were doing a solar collective for a whole city to put solar panels on everybody's roof. It would be free. You just had to sign and say, I want solar panels on my roof. And only 10 people came and signed. And you're going, why? So we went back to these people and said, why aren't you doing this? And after a lot of research, they said, well, my attic is full of crap, and I don't want people, these electricians coming into my attic and looking at it. So then we said, okay, listen, we will organize that somebody comes and cleans your attic before we put the solar. Everybody signed the contract. So you have to go look at what the root of the problem is. So be radical, look at the root of the problem, and it's a bit of a silly example, but you have to find what the root of the problem is. And sometimes, mostly, it's emotional. And it's not even factual. It's not, but you have to find what that root is. And if you, from there on, rebuild the arguments towards a solution, it becomes much easier. That's also an answer to your question with a little hat. Anyway.
Thank you very much. Before I give you some information about tonight, I would like to thank you one more time and give you a big applause, and thank you very much.
This was fun. Thanks. Thanks. Thank you for your question. Good to see you.